And Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went unto the chief priests to betray him unto them. And when they heard it, they were glad, and promised to give him money. And he sought how he might conveniently betray him. I want to talk to us today about the Great Pretender. The Great Pretender. Our message today spotlights a man by the name of Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot is without a doubt the most notorious and most vilified personality in human history. His name appears at the bottom of every list that chronicles the disciples, except in Acts chapter 1, where his name is conspicuously absent. Every time the name Judas is mentioned, we are reminded that he is the disciple that betrayed Jesus. Judas was a dismal failure as a disciple. And yet he was exposed to the same teachings as the rest of the disciples. The fact is, Judas saw the same miracles and was involved in the same ministries. But he never came to a saving faith in Jesus Christ. Judas spent 3 years with the Lord. And yet the Bible reminds us that he died trapped in sin. These other disciples were converted during their journey with Jesus. But Judas became stubborn, callous, evil, and hateful. The other 11 disciples were used of God in some amazing ways. And their lives demonstrate the truth that ordinary people can be used by God in extraordinary ways. However, on the other hand, Judas' life stands as a stark warning about the dangers of wasted opportunities, the tragedy of having a hard heart, and the danger of spiritual carelessness. Now, friends, I contend that while Judas was a failure as a disciple, he was the most successful hypocrite of all time. Judas played his role so well until nobody but Jesus knew that he was a fraud, a manipulator, and a pretender. On the surface, Judas looked just as common and as ordinary as the rest of these disciples. The reality is he was so ordinary until he never stood out from the rest of the disciples, because he hid behind the camouflage of hypocrisy, and nobody but Jesus recognized him. This passage of scripture reveals exactly how Judas schemed and plotted to betray the Son of God. And somebody in that church today, I believe that we need to hear and heed the lessons that emerge from the life of this tragic character. Dr. John MacArthur reminds us that the life of Judas teaches us at least 2 basic truths. Initially, the life of Judas reminds us that it's possible to be near Jesus and to even associate with Jesus closely and still be hardened by a life of sin. But then the life of Judas is a clear reminder that the purposes of God will always come to pass. In other words, no matter what anybody might do, they will never block the plans of God, because God always accomplishes accomplishes what God determines to do. Let me lift just a few thoughts that I see leaping from this text. And then I'm going to extend the invitation. First of all, this text shares a word about Judas and his personality. Brothers and sisters, I've got to admit, we really don't know a whole lot about the life of Judas Iscariot. In spite of the fact that he is mentioned some 20 times in the Gospels and twice in the book of Acts, Judas only speaks on 2 occasions, which suggests that he is an enigma and a mystery. However, from what the Bible catalogs about Judas's life, we can learn some important truths about him. When we consider his designation, we must highlight the name of Judas. Judas is actually the Greek rendering of the Old Testament name Judah. Now, most of us recognize from the book of Genesis, Judah was the son of Jacob. He was the father of the largest and the most dominant tribe in Israel. The name of Judah has 2 meanings. Jehovah leads, or he whom praises Jehovah. Therefore, I have a sneaky suspicion that the parents of Judah had some great hope for his future. I also believe that the family of Judah was deeply religious. And their hope was that their son would be led by God, or that his name would eventually be praised to God. However, his family had no idea that Judas would only be led by the devil, and he would ultimately bring praise to the devil. Don't y'all miss this message. Let me suggest to us, Judas stands as living proof that having a godly heritage is not enough to save a man's soul. Somebody needs to understand that just because you have Christian parents does not guarantee your soul's salvation. The only thing that will guarantee salvation is a life-changing, soul